So why don't we start by Dan? Do you want to explain a little bit about your role at MarraBio?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Dan Peters, and I'm CEO and co-founder of MarraBio. So, my background is as a scientist. I'm a protein engineer by training, and since we founded the company in 2023, I've sort of stepped more into the role of organising the commercial side. So, I think it's quite a varied role. I have to do quite a lot of different things that I never necessarily expected I was going to be doing. And I think most of it's about kind of managing collaborations, managing the team, and just trying to make sure that, first of all, the team are able to do the research and development with kind of as few distractions as possible, whilst also simultaneously kind of moving everything towards the kind of commercial goals and furthering those sort of collaborations.
MarraBio are a spin out from Newcastle University. How did it come about?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, we spun out last year, but actually, we've been working on this project in academia for a long time beforehand. So, the project actually originated in Professor Jeremy Lakey's lab about 30 years ago. He was working on it. And I think we'll be diving into the sort of full history of it another time where Jeremy can explain the sort of story in his own words. But essentially, we've been building the technology, and as you're working on something, you want to make sure that it has the maximum impact that can have. And we were publishing papers in academia, and just we became more and more convinced that we had something that would be really useful to people growing cells in industry and in other areas too. And so really we wanted to try and actually make this a real thing, get it out into the real world, not just making papers and reporting discoveries, but actually making products and making a real impact on people's lives. So that was kind of what inspired us to move towards commercialization and actually spin out the research and form a company.
So it has actually had quite a long process in the making, really. When you say, obviously it's almost startup, but there's actually quite a bit of background to it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the academic and commercial research is very different. So you work on it for a long time, and it's more about kind of almost blue skies discovery. We've always had that commercial focus, but really sort of working towards trying to just understand what it can do and trying out things just because they're cool or because they'll think they're interesting. And switching to the commercial focus, it's more about um, what will this do? What does the market want? What do customers want? And actually trying to engineer something that does that rather than just doing things that we think are interesting. It's got to be useful as well, and really prioritizing that research as well to make sure that we kind of have things that are most easily commercializable out sooner, as opposed to things that may be more longer term goals. The other difference is that even though you're working on it for a long time, actually doing that sort of quite focused commercial research where you're looking at things like expiry dates and barcodes and stuff like that. It's a completely different style of work, even though it's all science. It's a very different type of science than what we were used to before we span out. But it's a lot of fun though, equally as fun.
Did you want to give us a little overview into CAF1? The basics. What is CAF1? Why has it come about? And then we can go a bit deeper into it.
Yeah, so CAF1, it's a bacterial protein, and it's evolved to be sort of really innocuous and really non-stick. It works kind of like a cloaking device for bacteria. So when these bacteria sort of invade an organism to go on and cause disease, what the CAF1 is able to do is actually act a bit like a cloaking device or an invisibility cloak, and it sort of almost wraps the bacteria in a kind of cling film-like substance that when the sort of immune cells try and grab onto it, they just can't get a good grip, and then the bacteria go off and cause disease. But basically, what it means is that this molecule's got some really interesting properties, and these properties are derived from the way it's evolved. So it's evolved to be really stable. It's evolved to be, almost bioinert. So it's evolved so that cells don't stick to it. And it's evolved to be produced in really large quantities, which is fantastic because these are things that are really difficult for us to engineer, but are very useful properties indeed. So what we're starting with CAF1 is almost like a molecular blank canvas, in that it's got these really useful features, and then we can build extra features on top of this. So, for example, what we can do, the main sort of bit of the technology, is taking small chunks from other proteins. So proteins that either cells can stick to, in terms of extracellular matrix proteins, or even growth factors, which give cells the biological signals they need to sort of grow, divide, and behave properly. And you don't need the whole bit of these factors. You actually only need a small bit that interfaces with the cells. The rest of it's not necessary for it to do its job. So what we do is we take that small section and genetically encode it into the Cap1 structure. And because it's got this really sort of blank canvas like property, it means that we can really effectively mimic these different signals that we want to give cells without needing, without having any interference from what else the protein might be doing. And then because it's only a small chunk, it doesn't really change the other properties of the cap. So it's still really highly stable, meaning it doesn't fall apart even until really high temperatures. And it still forms these very long modular polymers. So the structure of CAF1, it looks a bit like a pearl necklace or beads on a string, where each bead is an individual CAF1 subunit. And basically, they all stick together a bit like Lego bricks. And because we can functionalize them individually, each particular building block can mimic a different factor. We actually have the ability to then mix and match these different building blocks and assemble them in different ways, meaning it's very easy for us to make a multifunctional material. So, those are basically the main features of CAF. It starts off as this kind of really kind of inert blank canvas, and what we do is engineer it to mimic different things, and then use this sort of Lego-like nature to build multifunctional materials really, really easily. And because the whole thing is really stable, it's easy to work with, and because it's made in bacteria, it's completely animal-free as well.
So would you say then that it lends itself to quite a lot of different industries?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're sort of trying to develop it for different applications. We see this as really being a platform technology, meaning we can, depending on what we put in there, we can really utilize it for different applications. So at the moment, we're looking at, materials for research, particularly stem cell research. But we're also on a journey to try and utilize this in sort of cultivated meat production and also sort of cells for medicine, so cell therapies and other advanced therapies. But I think it doesn't stop there. Longer term, we'd be wanting to look at using this maybe as a therapeutic itself, or in diagnostic devices, or in wound care. I think there's even industrial applications we could use it for. So I think what's really great about this is we can engineer it to do many different things. And actually, our challenge is focusing on the things that will be most useful most quickly.
So would you say that a big part of CAF1 and its success is the cost effectiveness to it?
Yeah, I mean, luckily the bacteria that we use to make this protein, they have really high yields. So
Mm-hmm.
part of this is that they just inherently make a lot of it, and then part of it is work from my colleague Helen, who's really sort of boosted the productivity of these processes, meaning that from a single batch you can just get a lot of protein, which is a lot to work with. And I think part of it comes down to the inherent stability and simplicity of the molecule as well. When you look at the wide variety of factors that we're trying to mimic, some of them they just have these quite incredibly complex structures. Some of them are very big, some of them have lots of different component parts that all have to be made separately. Some of them have to be modified by cells in different ways. Whereas the really great thing about CAF is that because it's so simple and because we're only inserting small chunks of these other proteins, that basically our manufacturing process can be the same every time. So we can get lots of different biological outcomes from the same sort of simple inputs, as opposed to having lots of inputs and lots of outcomes.
What personally do you find excites you the most about all these different opportunities that you've got with CAF1?
I think it's just the ability to do things in a different way. I think you see these really big and exciting new technologies, like sort of the novel foods industry or these advanced therapies, and I think there's been some amazing developments there. But the problem is you've just got to make so many cells for it to work, and the whole process is so expensive. And people have been working for years on developing these things and have made some fantastic progress, but there's always room for improvement. And I think that's where we want to come in, is can we, when working together with others as well, it's can we do things in a different way, in a way that's kind of more efficient, that uses less expensive materials, that reduces labor costs, that requires fewer animal-based materials, things like that. And can we do that to perhaps democratize some of these expensive advanced therapies and hopefully unlock some of the barriers that are preventing cultivated meat from really hitting the supermarket shelves anytime soon. So I think that's what really excites me scientifically. On the kind of more personal side, what's really exciting is working as part of and building a really motivated team to kind of address these challenges and just moving a lot faster than we ever did in academia as well.
So currently you've got fibronectin and vitronectin available. Why don't you tell us about the differences between these and what their uses are?
Yeah, so I mean, the first products that we've got out there are extracellular matrix protein mimics. So they're really useful for attaching cells to things. And so they're really easy to use because of their stability and their ability to stick to both plastic and glass surfaces. So there's a very simple protocol where you just pipette it in, leave it for a couple of hours, and then it's ready to go. And the calf sticks down to the surface. What then these products enable people to do is they allow cells to attach without the use of serum in their media. So, serum, people are used to using this. It's a very commonly used thing. And it's a very complex mixture containing lots of different things. And that's one of the reasons people really like it, because it's got a lot of sort of biological goodies that the cells need, including the protein components that the cells require to stick down. But sometimes there's situations where you might not want to use serum, and so in that case, you still need something that the cells can stick to, and that's where the fibronectin and vitronectin come in. They're mimics of these naturally occurring proteins in the body, just containing this small chunk of the original proteins in the CAF1 backbone. And they basically allow cells to stick down to these plastic and glass surfaces. And in particular, it's important for stem cells. So if you're working on mesenchymal stromal cells, which are a type of stem cell, these require fibronectin to really have the right sort of behavior, the right kind of biological characteristics. And similarly, if you're using induced pluripotent stem cells or iPSCs, these really require sort of vitronectin to be able to stick down and make sure that they remain stem cells and don't differentiate into something else that you don't want. So, the CAF1 basically provides this sort of really ultra stable, animal free method of being able to get these cells to stick.
Do you have a specific protocol to follow when using CAF1?
We do, but it's really simple. I mean, you basically just use the material at the right concentration. You pipette it into a well plate. You walk away and have a coffee for about an hour or two. You come back, remove the solution, and get your cells on there. So it's really simple.
How is the storage for CAF1? How would it be stored?
So we recommend that you store it at minus 20 degrees C long term, but actually because of its stability, it can be stored sort of short term either at room temperature or just in the fridge. So particularly one of the things that we're really pleased with is that we're able to ship the CAF1 products at ambient temperature. They don't require dry ice or regular ice, which we're hoping will have an environmental benefit and also a cost benefit because you don't need to include all of these extra materials when buying the products. And then, you just once you receive them, just store them in the freezer. But you can thaw them out. You don't need to keep them cold or anything once they're out of the freezer, and just make sure they're stored in that way.
So how long is the shelf life for CAF1?
The shelf life is 2 years, reflecting this sort of really high stability of this molecule. And we've done quite a lot of very thorough testing on this, both at sort of room temperature at 37 degrees and also accelerated aging at 42 degrees. And we just see that the proteins seem to be really really sturdy and really hold up well over time, even at the highest temperatures. So even if you keep your CAF1 at 42 degrees for a long period of time, our results so far seem to show that that still is able to completely support the cell attachment and growth. And we're hoping to release some of this data soon as a technical report.
Great. I know that we touched a little bit on the many different industries that it can lend itself to. Do you have any food or clinical grades CAF1 coming out soon?
Not yet, but we're on the way to doing it. We've got a sort of plan which we're hoping to follow and bring some of these higher grade materials out soon. So particularly with these sort of higher grades, we've been working with partners such as the Centre for Process Innovation (CPI) and also the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, interfacing with their regulatory and processing teams to try and work out what are the different steps we need to be able to produce both food grade and GMP variants of our products. So not yet, but watch this space.
Do you have any other ongoing projects that you'd like to talk about at MarraBio?
I have so many projects that are ongoing I'd like to talk about, some of which I probably shouldn't talk about, and we'd be here all day. I think one of the really interesting things about CAF is being able to combine the different modules. So some of the projects we've got going on are involved looking at sort of sticking some of these different bits together to make something that's more than just the sum of its parts. So, even for the case with the ECM proteins, you stick to different adherent proteins together, and sometimes you can get a sort of synergistic effect where actually the cells stick even better or grow even better uh, on the sort of multiple functionality material compared to just the individual ones, either sort of separately or mixed together. And then, of course, it opens up a whole new world when you start then mixing in the different growth factors as well and start to make some really biologically complex materials, but in a really simple manner. So I'm really excited with those projects and to see where we can go with.
Um, we did also talk a little bit already about your visions for the long term at MarraBio, but is there anything else specifically that you think is really exciting, or you think that MarraBio could really become a strong leader in?
Yeah, so I mean, medium term, we really want to sort of make a difference in these sort of large scale bioprocessing industries, whether it's food or medicine. I think longer term, it's going to be actually use whether we can develop versions of CAF1 that can be themselves clinically relevant. So, can they be used as a therapeutic? We've been working with the dermatology departments at the RVI here, where we're based, for several years now as well, looking at the use of CAF1 in sort of wound healing materials as well, trying to make sort of wound dressings that work better. There's a potential for CAF1 that could be used in different diagnostic or industrial purposes as well. I think one of the more exciting developments is actually rather than just having short chunks of the proteins, being able to include full proteins in there as well. And that's a sort of version of the technology that we're really just beginning to explore now with partners who are working in sort of really difficult cancer cells and other things like that. So I think that's what I'm really excited by, and also particularly looking at even further to the future other ways in which we might engineer CAF1 to do other exciting things. I mean, it's such a sort of a stable, flexible molecule that we really do have an awful lot of ability to make some different modifications to it to get to do some cool molecular stuff. And I think working through those and then finding out the applications for them is going to be really exciting.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also a really good point that you made earlier about your environmental consideration. I know that it's quite a big thing in the media at the moment about science companies not being so considerate for the environment. So that's also a nice point to touch on.
Yeah, it's something I think that we've only just started looking into, but I think could always do more. I think everyone could always do more on these sorts of things. I mean, one thing is reducing, use of dry ice, and being able to deliver to perhaps countries that have higher temperatures without needing a full cold chain solution. I think is a sort of good first step. But then looking forward to kind of more, I guess, sustainability, recyclability, things like that. What other ways can we engineer CAF1 or make use of its inherent properties to maybe make processes, easier or more sustainable? So yeah, I know that there's a big. It's really difficult, particularly in cell culture, because everything is, kind of disposable, single use. There's an awful lot of plasticware. And it'll be interesting to see whether there's any ways in which we can either interface with that or reduce it to kind of, I guess, prevent us generating so much waste in the biosciences field.
Definitely. I think the main thing is that you clearly have that attitude that you wanted to do better. So I think I don't see why it wouldn't come. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining. I'm sure that the listeners will feel like you've shed a lot of light on the situation.
Cool. Thank you for having me. It's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.